Hey guys, today we're talking retirement income, specifically designing a distribution strategy from your investment portfolio using buckets. Talking about what buckets are, what they aren't, how to set up a strategy within your situation. We also want to talk about the sequence of returns, why all this stuff matters, why it's tricky, why it's a little bit different for federal employees. And I'm going to show you an example that we can work through together in this video. Maybe you can take something from it and apply it to your own situation, create a strategy, tweak your own strategy, whatever it might be. So lots of value here today. Stay with me throughout the video. First of all, sequence of returns, retirement. Why is this stuff so tricky? Why is it so overwhelming for a lot of folks? Well, first of all, we're living longer, right? So the Society of Actuaries tells us that a 65-year-old today has a 35% chance of living to age 90 if you're a man, and a 45% chance of living to age 90 if you're a woman, right? So that's a pretty extended time period to try to plan for if you're retiring in your early 60s, so close to a 30-year time frame. So we're living longer, and taking money from an investment portfolio that fluctuate is a little bit tricky. So one of the big things that we're always talking about is the sequence of returns. And it is one of the biggest risks to retirees when they go out, when they decide to retire. And that's simply the series of returns when they happen within your investment portfolio throughout the course of your retirement. So if you have bad luck and you have down years early in your retirement and you're taking income from that portfolio, creates a lot of stress on that investment portfolio and that investment portfolio's ability to keep up and remain healthy over a long period of time, versus someone who has better luck and those down years happen later in retirement, because we know they're going to happen at some point. But if someone had a 10-year runway for the portfolio to create income and grow a little bit along the way, that creates a lot less stress. There's less of a runway to plan for, much better situation. And I'll show you a quick example here on how we can think through this. So let's say you retire next year and you've got $1 million portfolio, and you determine from that $1 million portfolio, you need about $45,000 a year in addition to your guaranteed income sources. Federal employees, we mentioned it's a bit different because you have guaranteed income from your FERS Pension and Social Security. So it's going to take some of the pressure in most cases off of your investment portfolio. That is a perfectly fine number. So if we divide 45,000 by a million, that gives us a 4.5% distribution rate. Okay, so reasonable within guidelines. The 4% rule is one thing. Guardrails give you maybe a different rate that can go up to 5% or more. Just depends on what you're ultimately trying to do. And bottom line, 4.5% is a reasonable number to take from your portfolio. Now let's say you have some bad luck and in the first year you lose 15%. So now your $1 million portfolio goes down to $850,000. Okay, now year two, more bad luck. Another down year for whatever reason in the markets, and you lose another 15%. So now that 850 goes down to 722,500. So you have $722,500 in your investment portfolio. I know this isn't exact because we've been taking withdrawals and there's other factors going on here. Simplistic example. You still need $45,000 a year from your portfolio to meet your cost of living. That number hasn't changed, but the portfolio has. So 45,000 divided by your 722,500 now equals 6.2% of your portfolio balance. So 6.2% just to break even, without talking about pay increases from inflation, all the other factors if we want growth in the portfolio. And then getting back to even presents an even greater challenge, right? So getting back to the $1 million we started with, you need much higher rates of return to do that, which might mean you need to take more risk than what is prudent within your account, okay? That's the sequence of returns risk in a nutshell and how it works. So what can we do to mitigate that kind of risk as we retire? Really, there's three ways to think through this. Okay, the first one is creating a balanced approach within your investment portfolio, right? Using buckets, making sure you're not taking too much from the portfolio is important there, of course. The second way is to just use a strategy where you adjust the amounts you take on an annual basis, right? If the market's up or down, you adjust the amount that you take from your portfolio. Not everybody can do that. If your expenses are set, you may not be able to change how much you need to meet your obligations. And the third way is create guaranteed income, right? So buy guaranteed income somewhere, buy another annuity, which also not really a great situation. You don't want to give up your investment principal in order to do that. You already have two sources of income, a FERS annuity and Social Security on the guaranteed side, but I think we want to keep our investment principal. At least that's kind of the way I think about it. So the bucket strategy is a way to think through structuring your account, structuring your investments to kind of mitigate this risk, right? And at least, what it isn't, it's not a silver bullet to outliving your money by any means. Like, you still have to follow the guidelines on how much you can actually take from your investment portfolio. Just because you think you need $45,000 doesn't mean your portfolio can support that. So you should only take what your portfolio can support and find that number. But it does offer you an opportunity to not have to sell into a down market, not have to sell your riskier assets when they're down. Okay, and it does that by creating a portion of the portfolio that's going to provide your income in pretty conservative investments, right? And for a number of years. So that money's kind of locked up in the conservative buckets. You draw your income from those, allow the riskier part of your portfolio to continue to be invested without having to sell off. Because we know that's when you lock in losses, that's when things get really tricky. So what's the framework for creating a bucket strategy? All right, first of all, you need to determine how much income you need on an annual basis. And of course, we want that to stay within the guidelines. A portfolio can only support a certain amount of income on an annual basis. But find your number. That's the first step. Step 2, you take that number times the number 5, right? And that's gonna go in the first bucket. That's gonna go in the most conservative bucket. Things that are invested in cash and equivalents, money markets, savings accounts, CDs. You can actually get some yield on those things right now. We'll see how that changes, but that's kind of where that money goes. So 5 years of what your annual income need will be in the conservative bucket. Now, you don't have to put the full 5 years in there. You can change the years on these things, but the general guideline is we're gonna create that bucket with a 5-year runway. And the reason we use the number 5 is if we look at some of the most extreme corrections in the last 25, 30 years, it's taken around 5 years for the markets to recover. The financial crisis of 2008 was about a 5-year recovery period. The dot-com bubble back in the early 2000s, again, was about a 5-year recovery period, a little more than that. So that's kind of the idea and the thinking behind that. You have enough money to cover you for that time period from your income conservative portfolio where you're drawing on a consistent basis. Now, the second bucket, bucket number 2, what you're gonna do here is you're gonna take that income amount and times the number 5 once again. So you're gonna put the same amount of money into the intermediate term bucket. You're gonna invest in things in this bucket like conservative bonds. Fixed income should play a big role here. High yield bonds can be worked into there. Maybe some conservative stocks and things like that. Things that have the ability to generate income and are gonna have a lower risk rating than you might have in some of the other, and things that may have a lower risk rating, at least comparatively. So that's bucket number 1 and bucket number 2. So you got about 10 years of your income need locked up in these 2 buckets. Bucket number 3 is then available to be used for your riskier investments. This doesn't mean going out and purchasing, concentrated equity positions. It just means investing according to your risk tolerance, what might be appropriate in that growth bucket, okay? So that's the idea behind the 3 bucket strategy. Now, of course, you can use more than 3 buckets if you determine that's right in your situation. You don't have to go the whole way up to 10 years on this thing. So a lot of it's open to interpretation, how aggressive or conservative you want to be in your strategy. So we're gonna look at an example here. We're gonna have a federal employee and a non-federal spouse. So this family is going to retire at age 62 together. The federal employee, the husband, is about 25 years of service, high 3 of $180,000. So he's going to have a nice FERS pension. The spouse is in the private sector. She's got some savings and she'll have Social Security to fall back on. They're thinking they're going to need about $12,000 a month, about $144,000 a year in annual retirement income to live the lifestyle that they want. Got about $1 million in portfolio assets on top of what's coming in from the FERS pension and Social Security. So let's take a look at that. Their income sources they're gonna look like this. He's gonna have his FERS annuity, $180,000 times 25 years times the 1.1% multiplier. He's going out at 62. That's gonna give him $49,500 a year in income from the FERS annuity. Now, they're also gonna claim Social Security at age 62, and I know this is a debated topic and it's unique for each family when the right time to claim Social Security is. These folks are going to claim it at 62 to take some of the stress off the investment portfolio. He's going to max out his benefit at $2,710 a month, which comes out to be $32,520 a year. She's going to have a benefit of $2,400 a month or $28,800 a year. So all combined from the FERS annuity and the 2 Social Security benefits, they're going to have about $110,820 of annual income. So it's a great amount, right? That's more than 75% of what they need to cover their retirement and income expenses. So the number that they need from their investment portfolio based on the $12,000 a month comes out to be $33,180 a year, right? That's 23% of their overall retirement income need. So it's more than, like I mentioned, more than 75% is covered from the guaranteed income sources. The other 23% is going to come from their investment accounts. We mentioned they got about $1 million in retirement and investment accounts. Okay, so $33,180 is going to give them about a 3.3% distribution rate, completely reasonable. It's on the lower end of things. And this, with guaranteed income sources like a FERS annuity and Social Security, this can work out this way. A lot of federal employees need to take a lower amount and some don't need to take any from their investment portfolio within retirement. It just depends on your situation. All right, so let's talk through. So what do they do here? $33,180 is what we need from the investment portfolio. If we're going to use a 3-bucket strategy like the one I outlined, how does that look? All right, so we're going to take 5 years of that $33,000. So it comes out to be $165,900 is what we need to put into that short-term bucket, the most conservative bucket, and put in those things like cash and equivalents, etc. All right, the next 5 years, we're going to take the same $33,000 times 5, another $165,900 going into bucket number 2, that intermediate term bucket. And then that's going to leave us with $668,200 to go towards the long-term bucket, right, where we can invest for growth or whatever their goals are. Now, I mentioned asset allocation becomes really important here. Just because you have a growth bucket does not mean you can go out and be super risky. And of course, this whole thing only works if you're staying within the guidelines of how much you can actually take from a portfolio without having it draw down. If you're taking 10% a year, the numbers still just aren't going to work, right? So it's important to structure the asset allocation appropriately, especially in buckets number 2 and buckets number 3, making sure you have the right mix for your risk tolerance and for your goals, right? And how you want to invest that money. Now, I know there's a lot of things. This was a simplistic example, so there's a lot of expenses that maybe we didn't touch on. Taxes, insurances, those sort of things. We're incorporating all that into the $144,000 example of what they need on an annual basis. So those things will be important. It's really important to come up with a true estimate of what you think you might need to spend. So, all right, so that was a little rundown on a bucket strategy, how it might apply for federal employees. I hope you found it valuable. If you have, like and share with the friends, colleagues, anybody you think might find some value here as well. And if you could give us a like and subscribe, we'd greatly appreciate it. So until next time.